Hi, everyone. Welcome to another exciting comics loving edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. I am delighted on this episode to be talking with someone who looks like they're in their own podcast studio recording space. This is what this space makes me think of. Delighted to be talking with Alex De Luca. Alex, thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Glad to have you. I hope the morning coffee is treating you well.
Yeah. So far, so good. I'll need another cup in about 30 minutes, but that's okay.
That's right. That's right. Well, enjoying it here as well, and glad to be talking comics. I know that folks out there will know you for a book called Dragon Whisperer, and I know that you also work with, is it Red Five? Is that right?
Red 5 Comics out of Houston, Texas. Yeah, I'm in California, but they're in Houston.
Yeah, yeah. And the project that we're talking about that is coming up is Enigmatown.
Enigmatown, yes, that is my newest project, my latest project, and that will make a debut as a San Diego Comic Con exclusive this July.
Nice. I love that title. That's such a good title.
Thank you. This has been long germinating, decades. It's gone through so many changes. And we'll talk about that, but this is the project closest to my heart by far.
Awesome, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we'll talk about the origins of that project, but by means of a first question, curious about your origins. How did you know that you wanted to tell stories and especially stories in comics?
Okay, well, like so many people that are into comics, I got into comics pretty young, like 4 or 5, because I have an older brother that was into comics, and because he was into comics and I saw his comics, I said, wow, I want to get into that too. Now, this is a long time ago, so we didn't have a comic shop where we were from at the time, upstate New York. So we went to magazine stores, and they
Hmm.
had stores that were kind of exclusively for magazines, and one was next to my dad's work. So we went in there, and we made an immediate beeline to the corner where the comics were, and we could have been there, and we didn't even know time stopped because we were just checking all the cool comics. This is the mid 70s. And so that's how that got started. And then, so I was a collector, and it was the usual suspects, mostly Marvel. But then I got into a lot of different independent things as I got a good deal older. And then I noticed, well, then Alan Moore happened. Chris Claremont sort of started this idea that it's more than just the art, because when you're really young, you look at the pictures.
Hmm.
Then
Hmm.
you'll read the words, and the words are cool, but the words there to augment the pictures. And then as still a young man, but an older young man, I realized, okay, this was written. There's a credit for a writer, and this was written. Somebody took their time to write this. Now we're looking at the art. It's still a visual medium, but there's structure and flow that is constructed by somebody that wrote something.
Hmm.
So I said, all right, I can't draw for nuts. Despite how many art lessons I've ever taken in my life, I've embraced the fact that I'm not an artist, and that's okay. Um, but I like to construct stories and script them out and write them. So in the early 90s, I decided I'm going to write comics. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to be a professional comic book writer. That doesn't mean Marvel's going to come knocking on my door tomorrow. That
Right,
meant
right.
I'm going to write a script, and I'm going to get with friends, and I'm going to go to conventions, and I'm just going to get in this community of comic book creators that all get together, and they're just a bunch of men and women that, oh, most of us have our day jobs or something like that, but we have this love and passion. And then there's a great equalization of being in a comic community that you see it at conventions, that kind of thing. Like, you'll see one person who may be in a place in life where money's not, you know, that's not coming in bushels, but they'll
Hmm.
hold a valuable silver age. And the person right next to them where they may be in a different place in life where the money's more coming in, and they'll be holding that same Silver Age and they go, hey, check it out. Oh my gosh, I got it too. And these two people will be completely different. And yet they have that commonality, that background of relatedness. So that's the community I wanted to be in. And then, well, I wrote things. I got together with artists, and all comic book creators at some point or another start something small, and most of the time they don't go anywhere. But the fact that they start it, and the fact that they do something, and the fact that they have meetings and editing sessions, and so you could have changed that. It's cute. It's so sweet, and
Hmm.
it's so communal. There's a I'm going to say a siblinghood of all of us getting together and doing this. So, and then when you start, everybody sucks. Just I'm going to say that unless you're born a Mozart, everybody starts terrible, and I was terrible. But we get better. We just keep doing it. Um, so I started. I did small things, then slightly bigger things, then an odd and end here published. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's it. I'm Stephen King. Uh, and then and then I went to the portfolio reviews at the various conventions, especially Comic-Con. Now, they don't want portfolio reviews of writers. It's in a way, it's harder and easier to be a writer. It's everybody learns how to sentence structure in elementary school, so one can think they're a writer, but one doesn't immediately learn how to be an artist. That's a forced training. Forced as in you force yourself to draw.
Hmm.
Uh, so one thing led to another, and then I conceived of many projects, but Dragon Whisperer had a particular drive behind it, and then I wrote it completely out, the complete script. I plotted the entire thing out. I went online to look for artists. I found I went to a site called Deviant Art, and then I found Glenn Fernandez. I had very specific parameters, and I found Glenn Fernandez, and then he had exactly what I wanted. Well, him and this other artist, she was kind of on the same level, but she was too busy, so she couldn't do it. So I said, okay, I'll get Glenn Fernandez, and he did my first entire volume of Dragon Whisper. He did the first two of five issues of the set, no, 3 of 6 issues of the second volume. And so 2 volumes of Dragon Whisperer and with Red 5 Comics, and that did really well. So now I'm off to my next project of Enigmatown.
Awesome, awesome. What was you said that Enigmatown has been sort of germinating for decades. What was the sort of initial seed that was there?
Well, the initial seed was the reading of my favorite author, a man by the name of John Belair's. And he was sort of like Goosebumps way before Goosebumps or a series of unfortunate events. Before any of that,
Mhm.
he wrote gothic young adult horror, and and the inextricable tie of his cover artist. His cover artist is Edward Gorey. Now, people may know Edward Gorey. Yes, Edward
Hmm.
Gorey is that really macabre, gothic looking artist, mostly in black and white, but some color too. And the pairing of John Belair's writing and Edward Gorey's art, I was immediately in love. And there's young people, and these young people have friends that are older people, but the older people completely treat them with respect. And there's a lot of like I said, it's gothic horror. It's a lot of gothic supernatural horror. And it just so happens that John Belair's was Catholic, raised Catholic, just like I was. So there's a lot of that ritual that I was familiar with. So it drew me in that way because I had a lot of familiarity. I was an altar boy too. So I said, oh my gosh, this is great. I want to do this too. So, but I can't do this. I have to do something like this. So I said, all right, I'm gonna take the elements of this that I love. Young people, really weird supernatural environment, a little bit of horror, a lot of thinking person's storytelling, and that. So I conceived of Enigmatown. I conceived of a set of characters. I conceived of an environment, and then uh, I pitched it to publishers as prose, not comics. And then, I got a few nibbles, but nothing happened. And I said, okay, I'll let that sit for a bit. And then, a few years later, I see something in the news, or I come up with a story and I adapt it to Enigma Town, and then I write something up, and then I let that sit. And then last year at Comic Con, when I was with my publisher, Comic Con 2023, when I was with my publisher, uh, what we do is we have meetings of the pitching of many of our titles. My publisher, Red 5 Comics, has hundreds of titles. And
Okay.
even one of them right now, they're making a very high budget movie, Afterburn, in Bratislava, of all places. Babe Bautista's in it. Samuel L. Jackson was in it. My publisher who wrote it, he flew out there and he was on the set. So we have those pitch meetings with various production companies and then in agencies. So then then there was the moment, what do you got, Alex? And I said, all right, I might as well pitch this. So I started to pitch Enigmatown, and then it was well received. And then they had some ideas. So, so that a year ago, July, that was sort of the beginning of, okay, now I have focus. Now I
Mhm.
have definitive characters, their ages, their looks, and a story. So then I was going down the freeway at full speed, writing. I got a wonderful artist, Victoria Carmina, whom I've worked with before. She has a webtoon called Morality, but she's a fantastic artist, very different. She works in a slightly more muted thing, not so much bright colors, which is exactly what I want. Um, a lot of color, but more muted, more pastelish. So uh, issue one, it's going to eventually just come out as just a trade paperback graphic novel, but we're going to have what would be a issue one if it were a floppy comic book. That's going to come out
Mhm.
in Comic Con as a exclusive, Comic Con exclusive.
Nice, nice. So it sounds like Victoria's doing both the art and the color.
And the color. She's doing the art and the color. I'm doing the lettering. I actually, um, when I first pitched Dragon Whisper and I had some art, I said, well, boy, was I wrong. I said, lettering's easy, right? I'll just do lettering. And oh my gosh. So I said, oh, let's see. Here's some Microsoft pre-formed lettering balloons, and here's Comic Sans font. I'm going to go to hell
Right.
for that. So then when I pitched it, it says, well, the story's pretty good. The art's good, but your lettering is piss poor. So I said, okay, now I needed that. And then what I did is I learned the craft of lettering. I got Adobe Illustrator. I took lessons. I read books. I took online courses. I lettered hundreds of pages before I even tried to pitch it. And then I got good enough to where I lettered Dragon Whisperer. So I actually I lettered Dragon Whisperer. And I'm at the point right now, that Robert Kirkman with the Walking Dead, he lettered the early Walking Deads.
Mhm.
And I assert that that's one of the reasons Walking Dead was so good, because if you're the writer and the letterer, you're going to edit yourself. A writer that sends a script to a letterer, those words are going to be on there, and those words are probably great. But once the writer sees everything in written words, and in their head, they might see it as a balloon. But the letterer sees it as a balloon on art. And there might be this giant balloon that's going to cover up art, or there may be context missing because the writer's going to write something in a script and the artist is going to interpret that. And it may not be what was in the writer's head. It probably is better, but it may not be what is in the writer's head. So as a letterer, I edit myself and I said, that scene could do better with this dialogue instead of what I originally wrote. And I should
Mhm.
cut things down. I always make the joke that if letterer me met writer me, letterer me would punch writer me in the face because writer me writes too damn much. So I lettered it. And I can't imagine anybody else lettering a comic that I write now. It's unthinkable the way that I edit myself so much. I love a lot of other letterers out there that are much better than me, but my story's in my head. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, interesting to hear about the process that way. And it sounds like one of the ways to get the book is Comic-Con, any other place, any space that will be available in the future that people can go check out, or social media spaces that you frequent?
Yes. Well, the Comic-Con exclusive, it has to be initially sold through and at Comic-Con. We're going to have pre-orders on the Red 5 Comics website, Red 5, the number 5, red5comics.com. We're going to have pre-orders available for that on the Red 5 Comics website. And then whatever doesn't sell at Comic-Con, we're going to have a month-long fire sale for the 1 month immediately following Comic-Con. So the end of July to the end of August. That's when that Comic-Con exclusive will be available. We have to follow some certain rules. After that, after that, the trade will come out, and right now it's looking really late 24 or early 25, which is going to be the entire graphic novel. It will be the equivalent of roughly 5 comic book issues or thereabouts. And the reason I grew up with floppies, and I love floppies, and they're really close to my heart. But the reason I'm going with just this one issue of the exclusive and then going straight to trade is I'm finding that writing it, I like the freedom of letting passages flow and run their course. The thing about a floppy is one needs to have in mind a 22-page chunk with closure and a cliffhanger. So you have to operate within that. And then I was finding as I'm writing, it says, I don't think I want to do that because this scene here is going to go longer than that. And that scene here may be shorter, and putting them together won't work out if it's a floppy, but it will work out if it's one big graphic novel.
Mhm.
So that's how that's going there. So that will be available at red5comics.com. That will be available through all your comic shop. It's going to be on standard distribution. Red 5 Comics does have a Facebook page. Just look for red5comics.com on Facebook. Dragon Whisperer has a Facebook page. Enigmatown has one, but it's not launched yet. It will be launched a little bit closer to Comic-Con, pretty soon, probably maybe in the next couple of weeks. And so there will be definite avenues to buy all this stuff. But the San Diego Comic-Con exclusive will only be available at San Diego, and we'll take pre-orders. And I'm imagining that if you're not going to San Diego, you can do a pre-order and then it could be shipped to you. I'm finding more out about that right now, but it will be available through all the standard avenues. Our website, your standard comic shop. It'll be distributed through Diamond Distribution, which is like the 800-pound gorilla of comic book distribution.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Well, so anyone who has been especially positive, helpful, or supportive along the journey that you'd like to shout out?
Oh, without question. The single most important person in the beginning of my professional comic career is Jimmy Robinson. Jimmy Robinson is an Image Comics legend,
Hmm.
having done so many comics for them, Bomb Queen, just to name a few. But in probably around 30 years ago, the mid 90s, it's at the beginnings of when I wanted to write comics, and we all went to San Diego and we all partied in hotel rooms. And then Jimmy, he started self-publishing this great series called Cyberzone. And I really loved it. And he's not far from where I live. And then he said, you want to write comics? I goes, oh yeah. Says, would you like to write an issue of Cyberzone? And I don't think he was drunk, but but I said, yeah. And then I did. I wrote a script, and like he asked me to write an issue of his comic. It was Cyberzone issue number 6, and I think it only went to 8 total, but I wrote Cyberzone issue number 6. And because he went on to bigger things with Image Comics and all that, I was able to ride the wave of just that little tiny thing to get professional status at San Diego for the longest time. That opened the most important door. So thank you, Jimmy Robinson, eternally. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome. Where would we be without people along the way, right?
Everybody, nobody that has made it in any industry didn't do it without help, without somebody supporting them. Nobody, small or big.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well,
Very.
glad that you're out there in the world of creating and glad to share about it. Anything that we've missed that you want to make sure to mention before we close out on our talk?
Well, let's see. I always like to end with I always like to remind people of comics that, and I'm one of those people that prefers the word comic book. If it's this thick and $80, if it has sequential art, I think of it in my head as a comic book. I think
Hmm.
the term graphic novel was invented, but I
Hmm.
used to be a snob about it. Now I say it. I used to be, it's still a comic, man, but it's okay. If you want to call it a graphic novel, you can. I get what some people say. There's a beginning, middle, and end to a graphic novel, whereas comic books may have continuity and continuation. But okay. But what I like to say is comics are a medium. They're not a genre. You can have any genre thinkable as a comic and then some. So I hear the term comic book movie, and that's where I'm a snob. That's where I said, do you mean superhero movie? Are you talking about Spider-Man? Okay, that's a superhero movie.
Yeah.
And yes, I'm going to be a jerk about this, but it's not a comic book movie. Have you seen the movie A History of Violence? Because, oh,
Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm.
that was a comic book. No way. It was. Or the cartoon Persephone, or so many others. Ghost World.
Hmm.
These
Road to
started
Perdition.
Road to Perdition.
Hmm.
All these started out. That's what I was thinking. That's the one with Paul Newman. Road to Perdition of Paul Newman. History of Violence with Viggo Mortensen. But that was also a comic book.
Hmm.
All these started as comic books. So you could say it was a comic book movie, but it's a movie that was based on a comic book. If a movie was based on a book, every other movie was based on a book. You don't call it a book movie. You just call it a movie. So comic books are a medium, and they're as much of a legitimate medium as any other medium is concerned. And they have a uniqueness to them. There are things that one can do in a comic book that are impossible to do in written prose and impossible to do in visual mediums like film and television. They are a sweet spot and can be considered a sweet spot between the two because they have both elements to them. But I like to use the distinction that Scott McCloud came up with in understanding comics is what time is in a movie, space is in a comic book.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, so we are three-dimensional, four-dimensional beings. We can't go back in time. So a movie passes through our eyes and we see it and that's done. And we can watch it again. We could rewind it, but for the most part, it is the passage of time. And it there's blink and you'll miss it potential in a movie or TV, but that won't happen in a comic. You can look at a page for an hour. So there's not a blink and you'll miss it. But you could do other things. You could put tiny little scenes. You can put Easter eggs. You could have someone's body make up all the panels of a comic, which you can only do in comics.
Hmm.
So Alan Moore, the great Alan Moore, was a master of utilizing things that can only be done in comics, uh, in his comics, and it's wonderful. So that's the thing I want to remind everybody. Comics are they it could be one person that does it all, and they could be an entire team that does it all. Comics are a visual medium. They need art. They don't need dialogue. They don't need balloons. There is a storytelling aspect to comics, and comics are conceived. Traditional comics have writers, have letterers, have artists, have all that stuff. But they are a medium, and they should be, and manga, traditional American comics, anything in between. They are a medium unto themselves, and have long since earned the great respect of their distinct art forms, such as any other art form.
Agreed, agreed, and very well said. Alex, glad to be connected and glad to have you back anytime. Wishing you well with Enigmatown. And again, I love that title. We'll put the cover images that are out so far in the video if that sounds good.
Yes,
And
please.
many, many thanks.
Thank you so much.